there's people like people ask me who I look up to, I look at these people that are doing that. They're in their 80s and 90s and still going strong and training and stuff like that. So I guess, well, let me end, because you mentioned there's some carnivore nugget with regard to,
Yeah.
So what is that? I'm interested to hear what he had to say about that.
Well, I was interested in what he thought of you or the carnivore diet back in the day. So I slipped a question into, because he does this teleseminar once a month. I slipped a question in there. He always gets questions from the mastering diabetes people about like challenges and stuff, and he never really takes it too seriously. But he does include in his recommendation vegetables, fibrous vegetables, 30 grams a day, up to 30 grams a day. And the reason he does that is because he hypothesized that there may be some value in it. He cites some literature that he saw early on where, new vitamins or whatever were being, discovered in vegetables. And he thought there may be some value in adding it. But his diet is, of course, centered around protein emphasis. And someone asked him about carnivore in one of these teleseminars, and his response was, we're still at the hypothesis level. That's all. So, his diet basically is a carnivore diet with the hypothesis that you may or may not need vegetables. And if you do, you can't have starchy underground vegetables. You can have some above ground greens.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned, because this is something, and I want to, because we've got, halfway through, and I want to make sure we get some of this information out there for type 1 diabetics that are watching, parents that have type 1 kids. Maybe they're not aware of the Type 1 Grit website, Facebook group that I think Bernstein is involved with, or some of the videos that are out there, but we'll use this opportunity. So how do we go about dosing? Obviously, as most people understand, type 1 diabetes, once you got it, it's not going away. You're not curing it. I have seen anecdotes of a few people saying they've come off insulin. Maybe they weren't properly diagnosed. Maybe they're in the honeymoon phase, something like that. There's some literature that says even long-term type 1 diabetics still have some residual beta cell function. It's still there. Maybe they'll be able to figure out it. They always hear about the beta cells are dead. I think what we see is that they're basically de-differentiating into non-insulin secreting, they lose some of the insulin secreting capacity. Could that be a reverse one day? Who knows? But with the assumption that you got this, you got it for life, you're always going to be insulin. How do we, like, let's say you're on a carnivore diet or a very low carb diet. How do you dose? What are you guys doing for dosing?
So the first question about the honeymoon, Dave gave a talk at Harvard about all his experience, and we did a few polls in the type 1 grit group to get beyond we wrote this paper that was published in Pediatrics, which demonstrated unprecedented glycemic control, excellent lipids and so on. But we didn't touch the honeymoon aspect. So I did a poll in type 1 grit, and there's a substantial number of people who've had honeymoons where they've used no insulin up to 1 year. Maybe 15-20% of people are honeymooning with no insulin up to a year or over a year. And then some people see a gradual increase. About a quarter of the people saw a gradual increase. And then, of course, there are a lot of people that never had a honeymoon. Dave never had a honeymoon. I suspect that the high glucose existed for so long, and other physiologic factors, he just burned himself out. And so anyhow, that honeymoon aspect or extended honeymoon aspect is quite common. It's nothing that raises the eyebrow. You'll have kids that use 1 or 2 units of insulin or diluted insulin. But how do you cover is interesting. So on the one hand, you have the established professional industry guidelines, which say you count carbs and you dose rapid acting insulin, paying no attention to protein as a free food. On the other hand, you have known biochemistry and physiology, which correctly explains why eating protein foods provoke the secretion of insulin. And this is one thing when I happened to learn early on, and I did not understand why this is such a mystery to people in endocrinology. In fact, Bernstein's whole book, in some sense, revolves around the idea of how to use insulin to cover protein foods. Yet if you asked 100 endocrinologists, does protein require insulin injection? maybe 99 would say no. And one would say, that's, something that's mysterious and we just don't know about you right yet. So that was a tip off to me that we're being given advice that people have no idea about, because all these facts are in the Bernstein book that you're not told about. So then you have to then understand, like, well, okay, so how does he control blood sugar if, low carb? What's the physics of what he's doing? As I explained that this oatmeal and rapid acting insulin was giving me a stochastic result. How come Bernstein thwarts that? And the reason that works is that, and he explained it to me, you've got carbohydrate with this sharp peak and rapid acting analog insulins with this sharp peak. And you're trying to match these two peaks up. And there's enough variability in the system via digestion and how insulin is absorbed that you cannot hit them. It's like trying to shoot a target from far away with someone on your shoulders, or it's like trying to drive down the road with your eyes closed, for 10 seconds, opening them up. You don't have enough feedback in your system to control that. And the variability is the result. And that's what I understood early. Now, why does Bernstein's dosing prescriptions thwart that? The reason why is that protein slowly provokes the secretion of insulin over many hours. And he uses an intermediate acting insulin, regular, which acts over 6 to 8 hours. And so now, instead of matching these sharp peaks, it's like equivalent to moving right up to the target. You've got this long, narrow, fat peak and another long, narrow. So if Dave eats a steak and then he's done and I go, dude, you forgot to give yourself insulin. He'd go, oh, crap. And then he'll give himself some insulin and it'll be fine, because there's no sensitivity when you mismatch these peaks. So it's a physics-based reason why this all works. Once you overcome that variability, the variability of meals, then all the other variabilities like exercise and things like that, growth, all those things can be overcome. But if you add enough variability from carbohydrate, and it looks like the threshold for that stochastic phase transition is right around 40 grams, 30, 40, 50 grams. We showed that in the pediatrics paper. If you add that variability from carbohydrate just a little bit, you lose control of your system.
Is that 30, 40 grams per day or per meal?
Per day.
Per day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it depends the type of, because we're talking about the peaks, right? So that if you're eating carbohydrate that's rapid acting, potatoes, rice, flours, you're in trouble. But if you eat something which is very slow acting, greens, then, that glycemic profile looks a lot like protein food. So again, you can cover it with regular. So that's, well, if you can get normal blood sugars and there may be a reason to have some vegetables, then Bernstein said, okay, I'm going to include them. Not required, but okay, as long, but he'll say, well, you can't eat berries because there's enough glycemia in berries. There's enough profile, and that's kind of like right on the border to give you a feel where you would lose control if you ate too many berries. One strawberry is not going to kill you.